And welcome again to the LewAllen podcast. We cover sports stories, newsmakers, and difference makers in our community and across the state of Michigan. You find us on thegreatvoice.com, our partnership with WJR. Also, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. We thank you for supporting the LewAllen podcast through your listening and viewership. And it's my pleasure today to welcome an auto industry thought leader, a commentator, lecturer, journalist of long-standing and an influential voice as it relates to all things auto industry. My time at Channel 7, he was a go-to individual for insights and analysis on news in automotive circles. That's John McElroy, who runs Autoline.tv and is a well-respected journalist and analyst in all auto circles. He is my guest today on the LewAllen podcast. And John, welcome and thank you for making the time for us today.
Dave, thanks so much for having me on. I can't wait to talk about the auto industry, my favorite topic.
Well, should we start with a brief state of the industry from your perspective? GM announcing third quarter. Included in that is the $1.6 billion charge related to EVs and tariffs. And, you know, this is a company that was going to be all EV at one point, has pulled back from that. I mean, change of administrations, tariffs. I mean, where are we today with the auto industry, which is so important to so many, of course, in Southeast Michigan and across the state of Michigan?
Sure thing. You know, I don't think I've ever seen the industry in such turmoil as right now. I'm including wars, I'm including recessions and all that. And here's why. We're at peak auto. Car sales today are lower than they were a decade ago. They're not growing, even with population growth. You've got the Chinese breathing down everybody's neck all over the world. You got President Trump enacting tariffs, providing some relief right now, but that has completely disrupted supply chains. You've had a whipsawing from administration to administration. The Democrats are in, they implement all these fuel economy and emissions regulations. Now the Trump administration is dismantling that. And who knows what's going to happen in 2028? What if the Democrats get back into power? We could see it all snap back again. You've got new ways of designing cars. You know, they're using what they call digital twins. And they're coming up with all new electronic architectures that essentially obsoletes everything that they have been doing. They invested so heavily in electric cars, and now they're having to write off billions of dollars in stranded investments. So you put it all together, and I've never seen anything like this in the industry before.
Let's talk maybe about EVs right now because of the bets that were made, in part because of, you know, federal government and mandates and what they said we needed to be in terms of direction, and then the pullback. I mean, how do you run an automaker, global automaker, when this whipsaw is happening? I mean, this has got to be something that gives you headaches daily, isn't it?
It sure is. So, you know, if you go back a few years ago, the big push to EVs came about because, as you just noted, government regulation. There was this near frenzy to say we've got to fight climate change as fast as possible. And the automotive industry went into the crosshairs, even though really in the United States, light vehicles, you know, cars and trucks, account for about 14 or 15% of all greenhouse gases. It's a nice sizable chunk, but it's by no means the majority of it. But nonetheless, the auto industry went into the crosshairs. But about the same time, too, Tesla really started to come on strong. Sales exploded. Its stock price went to levels unbeknownst to the industry before. It now has a market valuation greater than every other car company put together. And when automakers, if you go back to around the 2021, 2022 timeframe, any automaker or even supplier that announced it was making any kind of an EV investment saw its stock price go up. And, Tesla announced it's going to come out with this electric pickup. Now, we know it as the Cybertruck.
Right.
They got something like 1 million hand raisers saying, I want one. And when Ford came out with its electric pickup, it had 250,000 people saying, I want one. Well, that's what they said. They never showed up at the showrooms, and sales have been far, far below what the industry thought that they would be. And now the Trump administration is backing off on all the regulations that was really pushing the industry to do this sort of thing. And so you got a big mess on your hands right now. The auto industry completely misread the market, although I would say it was pretty easy to misread it. I think just about everybody did. And now you've had this whipsawing of government regulation. But I still think, this is my own personal opinion, the future is going to be electric. The cost of manufacturing electric cars continues to come down. They use a lot fewer parts than gasoline powered cars do. You don't need oil changes, you don't need tune-ups, you don't need to change the air filter, none of that stuff. It just doesn't simply exist. And so before this decade is over, I think you're going to see that it will be cheaper to manufacture an electric car than a gasoline powered car. And oh, by the way, the cost of making gasoline cars is going to go up because there are emission regulations coming that have not been reduced that is going to require more cost for those things. So uh, don't give don't mistake me. I'm not super optimistic that all of a sudden in a couple of years everyone's going to run out and buy an EV. But give it another decade or so, and I think by the end of the next decade, you're going to see close to half the market being electric.
And while I get the whole government, intrusion, if you will, in terms of planning for the automakers, at the same time, I mean, as you mentioned, it was unrealistic to think that that this country or the world, in terms of auto consumers, that you were going to be able to turn this, like the Titanic. I mean, and we're all going to be buying EVs. Like, I mean, price and people, whether they want it, whether they want to embrace it or not. I mean, the timelines that were being mentioned just didn't make any sense.
Well, in retrospect, 100%, right? But the regulatory agencies and the politicians behind pushing those things really thought that the U.S. had to really get on the ball here and have something like 53% of all new cars sold by 2032 had to be electric. And in retrospect, that was absolutely unrealistic from a variety of standpoints. Number one, having the manufacturing capacity to do that. Number two, getting the raw materials, these rare earth minerals that go into electric motors, the lithium and other components that are minerals that go into making batteries. And it's just not there. And what it was really doing was making the U.S. ever more dependent on China because, there's no question about it. China leads in this worldwide. And so, you just had these unrealistic expectations that the market could change that quickly.
Yeah, and then the tariff question, which is impacting automakers now for parts, many of which are produced, elsewhere and have to come to this country for vehicles made here in the U.S. I mean, that's a huge issue for automakers, even with some of the relief that the Trump administration has recently put in place, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, basically, I think everybody will agree with the goal of what these tariffs are trying to achieve, i.e., bring a lot more manufacturing back into the United States. There's no question that we outsourced way too much.
Mm-hmm.
The leaders in the country on both sides took their eye off the ball and just sort of accepted that all these manufacturing jobs were going away. I mean, they'd wring their hands and complain about it, but they never did anything about it. And the tariffs goal is to bring back a lot of that manufacturing and the jobs that go along with it, which, by the way, goes well beyond the automotive industry and absolutely has national security implications. But the way in which the tariffs have been enacted have completely disrupted everything in the industry, totally took their supply chains apart, have dramatically driven up costs and inefficiency. So I would argue that while I think the goals of the tariffs are spot on, this could have been handled a lot more differently. And right now we're enacting a lot of red tape. So there's all these tariffs, but it depends on what you're talking about and which country. And one day it's a 50% tariff, the next day it's a 25, and then it goes down to 15, and then it's back up to 50, depending on what the whims of the president happen to be. And so I think that with a lot more clarity, and it will settle down, it's starting to settle down, it'll help the industry. But as you mentioned, now the Trump administration is coming up with tariff relief so that you can have a tariff offset. And that tariff offset applies to 3.75% of the sticker price of a car. So try to make the math easy. The average price of a car today is $50,000. You get a little over $1,800 of an offset to the tariffs. But then the tariff, what are you talking about? Steel tariffs or aluminum tariffs or components from Mexico? Or are they coming? It is so complicated right now that even Trump's own bureaucracy cannot keep up with all the changes. So, like I said, I agree with the goals, but it's kind of a spaghetti up against the wall mess.
Yeah. All right. As it relates to bringing production back to this country, I mean, that has been successful or is being successful from the Trump administration standpoint, right? I mean, Stellantis just announced, that a huge investment as well, and vowing to bring more production here in the U.S. and adding jobs and that sort of thing. That is good for American workers.
It is, but we have to see what the net effect is. And it's terrific to hear that more manufacturing is going to be done in the U.S. and more Americans will get hired. But as I pointed out earlier, car sales today are lower than they were a decade ago. This is, by the way, this is true globally, not just in the United States. They're down in Europe, they're down in Japan, they're down in South Korea, they're down in South America, they're even down in China if you just look at the domestic market of the Chinese. So car sales are not growing. And these tariffs are driving up costs. And right now, the industry has an affordability crisis. The average American household cannot afford a new car. And this is a key reason why car sales have stalled out. Tariffs are driving up the costs. Even with these tariffs offsets and the like, supply chains have been so disrupted, the prices of cars is going to go up. And so what happens when you raise prices? Sales go down.
Yeah.
And if sales go down, you don't need people to make more cars. And so I think it's entirely possible we'll see more manufacturing come back to the U.S., but that car sales really don't increase at all. And net of everything, there really is only a very modest increase in manufacturing jobs. I hope I'm wrong on that, but right now that's how it's shaken out.
All right, let's talk about the China impact. At your office, I just saw a recent post of yours on LinkedIn where a company brought to you one of the Chinese models. You've seen it, you've looked at it, you've in some cases you've been in them or driven them. Where are we with China as competition in the global auto market, and where is that headed, and what impact might we see in the U.S. and how soon with those automobiles if they're allowed into this country?
Sure. Look, China is dominating the global automotive industry, and it's only growing. We don't see it in the United States or Canada. But everywhere else you go in the world, you're going to see Chinese cars. And China has so much manufacturing capacity. You could shut down every single car plant in the United States and in Europe, and China could easily fill the gap. It has tremendous overcapacity, which is going to hurt it, and we can get into that. But right now, the good Chinese automakers, because there's some pretty lousy ones too, but the good Chinese automakers can get a new vehicle to market far faster than anyone else in the world. Let's say it takes 4 years in the United States to go from scratch to new car. Chinese can do it in half that time, 2 years. Time is money. So that's a huge savings on their part. Also, because they're able to bring new vehicles to the market more quickly, they can introduce new technology far faster. And so they're absolutely the technological leaders in the world right now when it comes to vehicles. I'm not saying that the US or others like Japan, Europe, South Korea are also RANs, but China's leading the way. When we might see Chinese cars in the US, that's hard to predict. I believe it will happen, but the tariffs right now are successfully keeping the Chinese out. And we really need that, because if they were able to get into the US market right now, they would sell millions of cars here because their costs are so much lower. You know, Dave, I drove a car by a Chinese company called BYD. Build Your Dreams is what it stands for. This was the Dolphin, the BYD Dolphin. The car was it nothing special, four-door compact car, but with airbags, side airbags, air conditioning, power windows, power seats, cruise control. Sticker price $10,800. Now that I drove that several years ago. They've been chipping away at that price. Right now, you can buy it in China for $8,500. Now that's a very low-end car. It would not meet U.S. Safety standards and the like. But as you mentioned, I just got a chance to drive a new upscale Chinese car by a company called Xiaomi. And this is a car called the YU7. Everybody pronounces it U7. It's taking the Chinese market by storm. Ford Motor Company's CEO Jim Farley drove one this past summer, raved about the car. I just could not say enough good things about it. This car almost kind of looks like a Porsche in a way, has everything that the Tesla Model Y has plus more, and is just a little bit cheaper than a Tesla Model Y. And so that's an example of what China is able to do. If they were able to get that vehicle into this market, they would have a field day. And I've talked to car dealers, by the way, who are very interested in getting Chinese franchises. They would love to do it. You know, as one dealer told me, if I could get a BYD franchise right now, he said that would be like getting a Toyota franchise back in the 1960s. And look at the growth that Toyota has had in this country since then. So we need the tariffs to keep the Chinese out. But what happens if a Chinese automaker comes to the United States and goes to some state and says, look, I would love to build a $3 billion assembly plant and hire 5,000 Americans to buy cars here? It'd be very hard for a governor to say, no, we don't want you, you're Chinese. Somebody out there is going to say, come on to my state. I would love to have that. So what the Detroit Three especially need right now is to use this window of opportunity that the tariffs have given them to really get far more competitive than they are right now. They need to take out cost and take it out fast and make cars more affordable again.
Do you believe they sense that urgency?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And they're working on it. So a couple of examples. Ford recognized that its legacy operations in Dearborn, the way they're set up, they've evolved over a century here. The way they do things simply was not going to get the job done. So they started a skunk works, a totally separate company, essentially, out in California to develop a new generation of affordable electric vehicles. We'll see those in a little over a year and a half from now. General Motors also doing the same thing, taking lessons learned from the way that the Chinese are doing things. And it too will come out a little bit behind Ford, not much, with a new family of affordable electric cars. Very interesting that they're putting so much of their focus on the electrics right now. But you bet, both automakers and suppliers are really looking at ways not just to catch up to the Chinese, but to leapfrog them. Because if we try to do what the Chinese are doing and expect to catch up to them that way, we're never going to do it. That's how far ahead they are right now, and they've got scale that we just can't match. So, you know, if you go back to World War II, the people at Fisher Body, as Detroit was ramping up to meet the war effort, before it was even called the Arsenal of Democracy, they adopted the slogan, "When the strong arm fails, think your way to victory." And that's what the Detroit automakers and the Detroit automotive industry is trying to do right now, think their way to victory.
So, is the China threat, if we want to call it that, how much greater is it, if it is, than when the Japanese automakers came, to this country in big, big numbers and took market share away from, our domestic automakers? Is this even more, potentially more impactful?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, China has one goal. It wants to go out and dominate the global automotive industry. Dominate it. And when I say dominate it, that means push everybody else out of business. And they've got the capacity to do that, and they're well on their way towards doing that. This problem is far more obvious in Europe, for example, than it is here, because Europe has essentially let the Chinese in. The Japanese are not letting the Chinese in. The Koreans are not letting the Chinese in. We're not letting the Chinese in. But everywhere else in the world, the Chinese are taking those markets by storm. And so as they gain that market share and that economy of scale, their costs go down. And as we are, the Western world, including Japan and South Korea, as we lose that share and lose that scale, our costs go up. So if you go back to the 1980s, the Japanese really wanted to take a chunk of the American market. Their goal was to be formidable competitors, but the country's goal was not to drive our auto industry out of business. The Chinese are absolutely wanting to drive everybody else out of business. And they have much stronger government support to do this than the Japanese automakers ever had from their government, even though the Japanese government did support their auto industry tremendously and still continues to do, but nowhere near the scale that the Chinese are doing.
It's a scary world ahead, I think, for the industry, isn't it? I mean, in this country, in the Western world, as you say.
Absolutely. No, it is. And, look, Europe's going to be the canary in the coal mine. And I think before this decade is out, you're going to see massive plant closings in Europe. In fact, the German auto industry right now today is on track to lose 100,000 jobs by the end of the decade. I mean, these have already been announced. The plans are in place. This isn't like we think it's going to happen. No, the plans are already in place. And that's just in Germany. It's going to happen in France. It's going to happen in Italy, in Spain, in England as well. And that could happen in the U.S. if the Chinese are able to get into this market, unless the Detroit Three are able to become far more competitive, which, if you remember, that's what happened vis-a-vis the Japanese.
Right.
Japanese took this market starting in the 1970s, really came on strong in the 80s. Detroit started to study, how do they do this stuff? What are their operating procedures? How do they run their manufacturing operations? We learned those things. We applied them. And in the 90s, Detroit came roaring back. That can happen again versus the Chinese.
Well, and from what you say, it's going to have to happen for these automakers to survive going forward.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. John McElroy, my guest on the Dave LewAllen podcast. You can tell how in tune he is with the industry, his knowledge, his contacts, his expertise, which is why we wanted to have the conversation today because of the importance, again, of this industry in Detroit, Southeast Michigan, the state of Michigan, and all across our country, of course. Couple of other things. The auto show in Detroit, we've got new leadership there. Sam Clement is running things now. Much like the industry, auto shows are evolving. We've lost some. Others are trying to, maintain their footing or reinvent themselves to some degree. You've been all over the world. You've been to these shows. You're aware of what's going on. Are auto shows still relevant, and how do we make them more relevant? Are they important to our original equipment manufacturers?
Yeah, that's a great topic. So, if you go back to a decade ago, the Detroit show was one of the most important auto shows in the world. We had automakers and executives flying into Detroit for the media days, at least, of the auto show, filled up every single hotel room, filled up every single restaurant. Fantastic economic impact for the city. But then, automakers started to look at all the money that they were spending on auto shows. I mean, I'm told that Ford Motor Company spent $10 million on its exhibit at Cobo Hall for the auto show. And they started to say, do we really get a return on this investment? And by the way, it wasn't just the Detroit show. The biggest show, if you go back a decade ago, was the Frankfurt Auto Show. It was huge. It was massive. Everybody in the world went there. Everybody in the automotive world went there. It no longer exists. Our auto show has shrunk down. The Frankfurt show went away completely. The Geneva show in Switzerland, same thing. Everybody wanted to go to Geneva, especially on an expense account. That show no longer exists. And so, when people say, oh, the Detroit show is not what it used to be, well, that's true of every single auto show in the world. And also, we had unfortunate timing in the sense that the Consumer Electronics Show, the CES show in Las Vegas, pretty much ran at the same time. It's all high tech, it's very global, and all of a sudden, all the automakers decided, if I have to spend all this money to exhibit, I'm going to Vegas to CES, not to Detroit. Mm-hmm. And everything started to collapse, and then COVID, had a huge impact on that. And the long story short is, for the most part, automakers no longer support auto shows like they did in the past. They don't build super expensive displays. They don't fly media in from all around the world to go to their press conferences and the like. Having said that, auto shows are still really important to the public. Mm-hmm. The public likes to go to auto shows. The public is, especially right now with all this new technology coming in and all these electric cars, I mean, what a great thing to do, be able to do is go to one place under one roof and see everything that's in the market and do your shopping there. But I think that the days of just having cars on a carpet and expecting, throngs of people to show up is not enough. I think there's an opportunity to evolve auto shows to become more than just auto shows, to become entertainment venues that have cars there. And so, for example, I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I was at the National Auto Dealers Association show. This is where all the car dealers get together once a year, and this was in Vegas too. And they had a marching band in the morning going up and down the aisles and everything. And it was kind of corny, but I got to tell you, it added so much energy and liveliness to the whole thing. And it got me thinking, if you go to the Detroit Thanksgiving Day parade and you see all these marching bands from all the high schools from all over Southeast Michigan and even beyond come marching down Woodward Avenue, I thought, man, every day at the auto show, you should have at least two marching bands, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, going up and down. And by the way, everybody likes food trucks. And I know there's concessions in Cobo or Huntington or whatever we're going to call it now. Uh, wouldn't it be cool to have some of the greatest food trucks in the city parked outside so people can go out and I know it's freezing and I'll get into that in a minute too. And why not have entertainment acts? There's so much good music in Detroit.
Right.
So, and I mean of all variety, every single genre, and dancers. And so I would love to see, marching bands and food trucks and craft beer trucks, by the way, and entertainment of all different kinds going on. So where people would say, "Oh my gosh, we got to go to Detroit to go see this show." So what I'm getting at is if we think bigger and we throw a little bit of Hollywood in, a little bit of Broadway in, and make this an entertainment venue, I think you could bring it back very close to its former glory.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, it is a big challenge for sure, and technology has played a huge role in this as well, certainly, because automakers in the past would come to an auto show because that's where the eyeballs were of the automotive world. Now with technology, you can make an introduction of a new vehicle, announcements. You can do it anywhere, and make it available for anybody to see and participate in. I mean, that's a factor here as well.
Well, it's been a huge factor. And so automakers, looked at auto shows and they said, geez, the average press conference is about 20 minutes. So, we bring in all this media, because we want them to be at our press conference. And 20 minutes later, they're out covering our competition. And so what they decided is, why don't we just have our own event, not at the auto show, place of our own choosing? We'll bring people in, media in, and we'll have them totally captive for a day or two. And we're just going to be able to message everything the way that we want to over those 2 days, not having to worry that they're going to disappear in 20 minutes. And so you're absolutely right. They didn't even have to fly them in. And, especially during COVID, it was all done virtually. And that's when it really hit the automakers that, oh my gosh, we're getting all this media coverage, as much as we ever got in the past, for a fraction of the cost because we're just doing it virtually.
But that being said, the auto show is important, has been to Detroit, and needs to be important going forward. So if it's thinking bigger, thinking outside the box, I think some of that is beginning to happen for sure. And I hope personally that it remains a successful show for Detroit and for Michigan. And I'm sure, John, that you feel the same as well.
I do. And, I mentioned before, freezing cold outside. It's actually a smart idea to move it back to January, even if it conflicts with CES, because, again, you have to think of this as a show for the public, not a show for the media. And the public's not going to care if CES is going on. And by the way, you do it in the middle of January, what else are you going to do?
Right.
I mean, it's freezing cold, and look, I'm a winter sports guy, but if there's no snow out, I can't go skiing, and if it's cold but not cold enough, you can't go snowmobiling or ice fishing or any of that sort of thing. And so when they had the auto show in September, you're competing against high school football, college football, the NFL. There's proms going on. Some people still have their boat in the lake. I mean, there's so many other things competing for your attention and time. I think it's been a very smart move for them to take it back to January.
John McElroy, my guest on the Dave LewAllen podcast. In the introduction, John, I mentioned all of the things that you are involved with and have been over the years: journalist, lecturer, entrepreneur, certainly, and that includes your company and the productions. You were the first really doing web-based automotive shows and insight and analysis through Autoline.tv, which continues to this day. You're on the radio and you're a go-to source, for others in the media in terms of industry trends and analysis. You've created, through your background and expertise, I mean, your own little auto empire here at autoline.tv. And, you know, if anyone is interested in this industry, I mean, they're tuned in to what you're doing.
Well, thanks for saying that, Dave. It's been a labor of love. I mean, I got into this business because I'm a hardcore car nut. I mean, I'm, a hardcore automotive enthusiast. But as I learned more and more about the industry, I now don't just call myself an automotive enthusiast. I call myself an automotive industry enthusiast.
Mhm.
And I actually find the industry more interesting than the cars themselves, even though I'm still a hardcore car nut. And it's because it's an important industry. It generates so much wealth over so many different socio-economic layers of society that it's important that we keep it. And especially for those of us in Southeast Michigan, uh, we need to make sure that our auto industry, and by the way, I expand that beyond just GM, Ford, and Stellantis. Toyota has massive engineering
Mhm.
operations in Michigan. So does Hyundai. So does Nissan. And then you look at all the suppliers. We have all the major international suppliers right here doing a lot of engineering, R&D, even manufacturing. And so we need to keep that. Yes, we need to diversify as a state, but we have a whale of a base there in the automotive industry, and it's so important that we keep it healthy and competitive. And so I see my job as, pointing out where the industry is missing opportunities and and praising them when they do things well.
Well, and let's hope going forward they do a lot more well so that this industry can remain vibrant and successful here in the United States.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah. John, thank you for this. We appreciate the time so much for what you offer and what you have given us here today in terms of the state of the auto industry. Appreciate all of that and continued success to you, my friend. Thank you.
Dave, it's been wonderful. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and it's great to see you again. I mean, I know everybody's listening on the audio, but we got a video feed here, and it's so good to see you again.
Excellent. John, thank you. Continued success. Talk soon.
You bet.
Thank you, John. John McElroy. He is the president of autoline.tv, auto industry analyst, expert, go-to guy. We love him and appreciate his time today on the Dave LewAllen podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us as well. Thanks to our producer-director, Josh Bowron, today. You find us on YouTube, on thegreatvoice.com, our partnership with WJR Radio. Also, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify. We're there wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Appreciate you liking what you see or hear and also sharing it with your friends as we continue to grow our network of supporters as well. Until next time, stay safe, be kind.